Hello and welcome to Rob's Retro Reviews, where today we're carrying on with the Hugo PS2 marathon by taking a look at the second game in the series, Hugo CannonCruise. If you're interested in watching the first video in this marathon, then I'll link it down below, but for now, let's pop this sucker in and get started. Hot off the tail of Hugo Bukkazoom adding yet another game genre to the portfolio of Hugo games, we now have yet another genre to add to the mix. And this time Hugo is taking on a bit of an obscure genre. So obscure in fact, that I'm not sure it even has an official name. Like, would you call this a sailing game? Maybe a buccaneer game? I think it's just considered to be an action-adventure game, but that's my problem with piling games into that genre. It's just way too open and everything that's difficult to categorise just gets called that. So yeah, I guess I'll just call it a sailing game. The game's main menu doesn't have the charm that Bukkazoom had, and it's much more simple, just consisting of basic text with music over it. It gets the job done and it's not confusing, but it does have a lack of charm when compared to some of the other Hugo games. I will say though that the music here is actually quite epic and gets you in the mood for a pirate adventure the likes of which you've never seen. The actual game begins with a cutscene. Well, I say cutscene. It's more of a still image slideshow with voice acting over it. What happened here? All of the PS1 Hugo games had full-on cutscenes, and this was an aspect I actually enjoyed about every single one of them. But with the PS2 series, so far none of them have had proper cutscenes, and it's not only disappointing, but just a bit strange. Like, this is a new generation of consoles, and you'd think they would have wanted the Hugo games to improve on literally every aspect from the PS1 generation, but here we are looking at still images as replacement cutscenes. Anyway, the story here is that Scylla finds out about a witch that a long time ago planted an apple tree in a tomb. The apple tree only grows one single apple every 1,000 years, and any person who eats this apple gets 3 wishes. Scylla's plan is to get the apple and wish for the destruction of all of the trolls, thus finally defeating Hugo once and for all. Jeez, she's really going all out this time with trying to kill Hugo, isn't she? I mean, surely she could just walk into his house and kill him with her magic, you know, with her being a witch. But whatever, I guess she's just a fan of being pointlessly convoluted. The catch with Scylla's plan is that the tomb where the apple tree resides is sealed, and to open it, she must raise all of the statues of the witch's sisters from the bottom of the ocean. These statues contain the magic needed to unlock the tomb and get to the apple tree. So she sends a message to all of her allies to find these statues and get the magic. Hugo meanwhile is completely unaware of Scylla's plan and is chilling out at home. He plans on going on a fishing trip to catch 2 bubble fish for Hugolina, and to do this he enlists the help of his navigator, Fernando the Toucan. Back in Hugo Bukkazoom, Fernando was a playable character, but because he hadn't been in any previous PlayStation Hugo game, I had no idea who he was. So it's nice to have finally been introduced to him by playing Hugo CannonCruise. The 2 friends set sail, and this is where the gameplay starts. This section is basically a tutorial teaching you the controls and the basic game mechanics. Right off the bat, I have to say that I think graphically this game is actually pretty good. It's colourful and has a good draw distance, and the water effects are pretty good for the time. There's even reflections of Hugo's boat and other environmental details in the water too, which is a nice touch. Later on in the game you'll sometimes see NPC characters walking around on the land too, which sells the game world and makes it feel like an actual place. Later levels also have different weather too, which is nice for that extra bit of visual variety. Obviously with the game taking place entirely on water, there's only so much the developers could have done to make each area feel unique. But I feel like they did a pretty good job in this area. There's also things like birds flying around above you, which add some movement into the environment too, and I actually later found out that you could shoot the birds out of the sky. So there's actually a nice amount of attention to detail here, especially for a Hugo game. The controls are fairly straightforward. Moving the left stick moves Hugo forward or backward and also rotates the boat. Pressing R1 fires the cannon at the front of the ship, pressing L1 releases a mine behind the ship, and pressing triangle and circle activates 2 different first-person modes. The triangle view mode is from the perspective of Fernando, who has the ability to zoom in and take a look at things off in the distance with his telescope, and the circle viewpoint is from the cannon's perspective, which helps with aiming. I pretty much played the whole game from the cannon's viewpoint because there's no advantage of staying in the default third person view. I think this is a bit weird, and maybe the ship should have moved faster in third person to make you think about which perspective you were using a bit more, but still the controls are simple, easy to understand, and get the job done. There's nothing really to complain about in that area. Where I do have some complaints though are in the camera controls. For some reason, when you're in third person mode, the left and right camera controls are inverted, but when you're in first person mode, they're normal. So as you can imagine, this is extremely confusing when you switch into one perspective to another, and I just find it so weird. I've never known a game to have a mixture of inverted and normal camera controls at the same time. And there's no way of changing the camera controls either, which is a bit of a bummer. Still, because I played the majority of the game in first person, this didn't really matter too much. After learning the basics of the gameplay and controls, another cutscene plays out where Hugo is suddenly attacked. We then get a combat tutorial in which we're told that when the health bar is completely red, the enemy is dead. So this game isn't pulling any punches, we're literally killing our enemies. We're not just destroying the boats, we're murdering them in cold blood. I always knew there was a sinister side to Hugo. The actual combat, just like the controls, is quite simple. You just get close enough to an enemy to see a red lock-on symbol appear, and then keep the camera facing the enemy and shoot. Then just repeat that until the enemy is dead. Any defeated ship will drop a random item, either a health pickup, ammo, or a bomb which will explode if you touch it. There's also upgrades you can find scattered in the levels which will either make your boat faster, give you a cannon upgrade, or a defense boost. While these upgrades are great because they offer an incentive for exploring and even give the game replayability because you might want to go back and collect things you missed, I do have a problem with them. For ages I found myself not even bothering to look for the upgrades because the boat is so slow and there's not really any landmarks that your eye is drawn to give away where the secret upgrades are. I didn't want to waste time sailing slowly around every nook and cranny of every level to find them because it would have been a massive waste of time. Plus, there's no way of opening a map to look at suspicious areas, despite the fact that you have a small map at the bottom of the screen during normal gameplay. It wasn't until very late into the game that I actually discovered that the upgrades appear on this minimap. The reason I didn't notice this is because the icon used to give away the position is the same icon used for the story objectives. So I always just assumed I had gotten all of the required objectives I needed and moved on. Seriously, why couldn't the upgrade icon have just been a different colour or something? Ridiculous. So Hugo defeats the attackers and Fernando spots a note in the water. After diving in and retrieving it, Hugo discovers it's from Scylla and learns about a plot to open up the witch's tomb and kill all of the trolls. So the rest of the game's story basically just consists of Hugo defeating all of Scylla's allies and raising the statues before they do, getting the magic to open the tomb for himself and preventing Scylla from being able to get the apple. One thing I've not mentioned yet is the voice acting, and I have to say, I actually think the voice acting in this game is the best we've ever had in a Hugo game. Scylla's voice matches her character well, and she's actually quite expressive.
And I intend to be the one who eats it, and gains the 3 wishes. That will guarantee doom for all trolls!
Hugo's voice is reminiscent of his Hugo 1 and 2 voice, but less obnoxious, which suits his character in this game.
Well done! A nice quiet day at the fjord. No, it can't be! Pirates!
Did you invite someone over for dinner?
Fernando, stop joking around! It looks like we're in for some fighting!
And even Fernando's voice is also quite charming too.
Rise and shine, Fernando!
Oh, Capitan Hugo.
And how is my dear navigator today?
I feel like a seasoned pirate.
Ah, come on! I sense a wonderful day ahead of us!
Aye, aye, Capitan.
Remember in Hugo Bukkazoom when I doubted the way that I've been pronouncing Don Croco's name all this time because in that game they pronounced it Don Croco? Well, guess what? In Hugo CannonCruise, he's back to being Don Croco.
Don Croco. A mouthful of teeth, I feel. Just look, no hands on the wheel.
Pay attention, Don Croco! You can stuff your chops when we're finished.
I knew I was right, but it isn't all good news, because in this game they've started mispronouncing Scylla's name as Scholar.
You just wait, Scylla! Your own evil will undo you!
The seal of Scala. What's she up to now?
I mean, I guess you can't have it all. It's either Don Croco or Scholar, so I guess I'll take Scholar. They maintain Hugo's more obnoxious aspects in CannonCruise by having him still knock on the inside of the TV and break the fourth wall by talking to the player.
Hello! Hi there! Looks like a great day for a relaxing trip at sea.
But these attributes aren't constantly used through the whole game, so they do actually come off as being more charming than outright obnoxious like they did in the first few games. In this game it almost feels like a reference rather than a main character trait, and I have to say, I kinda like that. For the most part in this review, I've been being quite positive towards CannonCruise, and that's unusual when I'm talking about something related to Hugo, but this is the part of the review where all of that changes. I'm done talking about what's good about it, let's get to the meat of the situation and talk about what a goddamn mess this game becomes after the first level. There's many problems with this game, and it's actually kinda difficult to pick a place to even begin talking about it. But I guess let's just start by talking about the main problems I have with it. One of the biggest overall issues is that it's boring, and it's almost entirely down to luck as to whether you can complete the levels or not. Every level is identical to each other, basically having you go from point A to B, destroying waves of enemies, and that's literally all you do for the whole game. There's no variety, there's no obstacle courses, no races, no minigames, or anything to make the game more interesting. It's tedious beyond belief, and it just feels like nothingness. It's just so mindless and lacking in any kind of strategy or excitement. It's dull, and it feels like you're constantly going back and forth taking part in the same boat battles over and over again, with nothing to break up the monotony besides sections of the game where there's literally nothing to do but sail forward to the next objective marker at an unbelievably slow pace. The items you get from destroying enemy ships is random, meaning that you could either get ammo, health, or a bomb which will take health off of you. You're always going to want the health pickups though, because you always have enough ammo, and the bombs are obviously not what you want because they don't benefit you. So sometimes you'll get loads of health pickups and be able to complete the levels easily, but sometimes you'll get nothing and just get annihilated halfway through the level and there's nothing you can do about it. The enemy skill level seems to be drastically random too. Like sometimes a normal enemy ship will bombard you with perfect shot after perfect shot, and sometimes they'll miss you with every shot. It's like there's no actual difficulty to the game and it's just completely RNG. This wouldn't be so much of a problem though if it wasn't for the fact that there's no checkpoints. There's not even a single checkpoint for any level of the game. This is extremely bad because the levels can actually be really long, so if you die right at the end, which trust me is very easy to do, you'll have to go all the way back to the start of the level and you've just completely wasted potentially 45 minutes of your life. This is probably the worst thing about the entire game. If there had been generous checkpoints, then I feel like the game's random elements wouldn't have been anywhere near as goddamn annoying. But because of the sheer amount of time I wasted playing this game with nothing to show for it because I lost so much progress by dying, it's just an unacceptably bad experience. It's frustrating beyond belief, and there's absolutely no reason that you should put yourself through this. There's not even a single aspect of the game that redeems it in any way. It's like they laid out the groundwork by having these mechanics like ship upgrades and different camera perspectives, but then they didn't have a clue how to make an engaging game around this foundation. The levels are so similar to each other that they might as well be copied and pasted and then just had the weather changed to give the illusion that it's a different level. Even on the extremely rare occasion that you're given an objective besides destroying all the enemy ships, you still just sail into a point on the map and then destroying a minefield, so it's fundamentally the same thing. And even then they reuse the same minefield objective in a later level, so they couldn't even give the game one unique objective.
It's a long way to shore, Viking, and it's even longer to the bottom of the sea.
My god, it's not enough for Hugo to literally have murdered his enemies, he's got to quip about it afterwards too. He's messed up.
Ah, jeez, I can't swim. Can you?
The normal combat can be frustrating because of how utterly random it is, but you haven't felt frustration until you have to destroy a catapult tower. These things are ridiculously accurate and can shoot at you from 6 miles away, whereas you need to be insanely close to hit them. And there's not just a couple of these things, but every level that appears later in the game has bloody loads of them. It's quite simply not fair, and this, on top of the other waves of enemies constantly shooting at you, makes the game feel so insanely frustrating that I just simply cannot even slightly recommend that anyone plays this game. Let's take a breather for a minute and see what Hugo and Fernando have to say for themselves.
Said incoming, not bone wagging.
Hey, I'm the captain of this ship, and I'll wag whatever I want, whenever I want. Oh, never mind.
Was that a joke about wagging his, you know? Because if it was, then this game seriously has issues. The music in the game is pretty much the same in every level too, which doesn't help to break up how boring this is and how similar these levels are to each other. And you know what else? I know it's kind of a staple of the Hugo series to have interesting death animations, but when you die and lose half an hour of progress and Hugo does something like this...
Surfing safari, surfing safari, oh! Jeez, now all I need is a boat. My aim's a little off today.
Toughen up, troll man!
It makes you want to rip his tiny troll head off. I feel like I want to say more about this game, but there's nothing here to even talk about. If you play the first few levels of the game, you've experienced all it's got to offer, and there's no point in continuing. So I guess let's just talk about what happens at the end. After getting all of the magic from the witch statues that Hugo raises from the ocean, he finally tracks down the tomb. But as he gets there, Scylla intercepts him and Hugo fights Scylla's guards while she goes off into the tomb. I'm not sure if this part of the game just didn't work for me, but I was in the middle of fighting Scylla's bodyguards and the screen just faded out and continued without me having beaten them all. But anyway, Scylla then captures Hugo and heads into the tomb. However, Fernando, who previously ran away after he was scared by Scylla's ships, reappears and rescues Hugo. The two of them then get their boat back and destroy Scylla's ship. The final cutscene then plays out where Hugo eats the apple and, not knowing what it's capable of, wishes to go back home. Hugolina is annoyed at him for not getting a fish, so he wishes for some but they land on her, angering her even further. So Hugo wishes he wasn't there and simply pops out of existence. And that's it. I do have to admit, I do like this ending. It perfectly sums up Hugo's character that he's so unaware of everything going on around him that he wastes 3 wishes on such unimportant things. It's just a shame that to get to this payoff, you need to go through such a goddamn slog. Just like with Hugo Bukkazoom, CannonCruise does actually have a 2-player mode. But rather than being a split-screen competitive or co-op experience, which might have actually been quite cool, it's more so just replicating what the normal single player would be like if 2 people were sharing one controller. So the first player is in control of the boat movement, and the second player is in control of the cannon movement, the shooting and dropping mines. It's an interesting take on a 2-player mode, I'll give it that, but it's a little bit pointless and I feel like an actual 2-player mode might have been better. I'm giving Hugo CannonCruise a 1 out of 10. It's the worst Hugo game I've played yet, because not only is it a bad game, but it's not even got any comedic value like the first 2 Hugo games on PS1 had. At least with those games you could laugh at how bad they are, and they're so short that it doesn't really matter if it's frustrating. With CannonCruise though, it's not bad in a good way, it's just bad. It's boring, it's repetitive, and it's just absolutely not worth your time. The only reason I've given it a 1 rather than a 0 is because, well, it functions as a game, but not only that, they have put effort in with the game's graphics and by adding replayability through the use of hidden upgrades, a ranking system and difficulty options. The thing is though, I can't think of anyone who would ever want to replay this. It's all well and good having replayability, but if the player is so put off of the game that they don't want to touch it again, it's pointless. This game does also have perhaps the best voice acting we've heard in the Hugo series so far, so I guess at least it's got that going for it. Well damn, I honestly didn't expect this coming from a Hugo game on the PS2, and I'm actually really disappointed. Like I said earlier in the review, this is probably the worst Hugo game I've played so far, and I just didn't expect that coming from Hugo CannonCruise. Still, onward and upward I suppose, because there's literally no other way to go from here but up. So, join me next time in the Hugo PS2 retrospective, where we'll be taking a look at the first reboot the series underwent, with Agent Hugo. I'm actually excited for this one, and I'm looking forward to what it brings to the table. So, let's see what happens. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more content like this coming soon. And also, if you feel like it, drop a like and leave a comment letting me know what you think to CannonCruise too. And until next time, bye!